It's a culture, and it's a subculture.
This subculture
that becomes celebratory of crime.
And that's why
Criminal landscape.
So that's why I threw all that in there.
Yeah.
Just talk on that a bit if you don't.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's the first thing. When we're dealing with that codification, one of the things that strips us away is a term, ethnic minority. So immediately we are othered and we made something else.
And smaller.
When you're othered and made something else, you have to find what is there for you to celebrate. And what we find, especially as men, not so much young ladies, in this generation, the last generation, but before them, it was us as men. It will be crime. We run to it. We adopt it, we celebrate it. We don't even know why.
I think there's a side of it, yeah, where we've maybe discussed this before, is that poverty doesn't give you much to shine with.
Absolutely.
So when you're coming up in a time where you haven't got much, and you may not even be good looking, you look for the angles in which people celebrate.
Absolutely. We're programmed at a DNA level, and there's no way we can escape it. I believe I'm the smartest person I know in the back of my subconscious mind. I'm far from it. And I believe I can circumvent all my programming because I'm the most pro-black Pan-African. It's all bullshit. I'm as programmed as anybody else. I just chose to acknowledge that I'm programmed at a DNA level. We all went to the same school. We all went through the same training. And do you know what that training is? And do you know why we adopt it at a DNA level? Because whilst we believe we're actually being educated, we're being programmed to serve. We're being programmed to serve the establishment of this country. And this is going on across 400 countries across planet Earth. We're programmed to serve. And what that actually requires is to reduce our spirit, is to reduce our creativity, is to reduce our tenacity. And what comes out of that is the automaton that is going to serve the status quo so that it remains. So that this guy in this position can hand off to his children the position of privilege where we serve them. The worst part of this service is a brand. It's the best brand on planet Earth. It's a better brand than the Nike. You know the best brand on planet Earth? Black. There's no black nation. There's no black continent. Black is a social construct. Like Nike, like Apple, like iPhone, you name it, but it's the best brand on planet Earth. It's the most widely adopted brand. You will have a man who is in a tribe where he is fully in and of his culture and still adopt the black brand. Why? Because we made ourselves part of the European 500-year black experiment. Now, let's just imagine if slavery never ever took place, but we adopted the black brand. Slavery is part of the black brand. Slavery is part of the black brand. Being powerful bucks is part of the black brand. Being criminals is part of the black brand because we didn't create it. We are merely subjects in that 500-year black experiment. So when we talk about the black brand and how powerful it is, we have to actually deconstruct how much we've adopted this at a DNA level. You know where the two black programming comes in. So there's 4 or 5 of us at a table, but the building is largely European. And then somebody walks by and we change how we speak or we become a little bit quiet. It's because that programming is kicking in. So if you think about this as our CPU has an operating system. And if we adopt the black brand, that operating system is the black brand. Now, when the two black program kicks in, remember, our tenacity goes on strike. Our natural born vernacular goes on strike, and who we are goes on strike. So when we turn up in a building, we actually turn up as the black brand, there's two things happening. One, there's what we believe the black brand to be. I'm black and proud. Right up until we're the only black in the room. And when we're the only black in the room, what happens? Yeah, that's a little bit too black. I understand we can change that. We can dilute it and we just start backtracking straight away. What if we actually understood the black brand for what it is? How much would that empower us? If we understood the black brand to be what I know it to be, a construct, something that we're not obligated to adopt, how powerful would we be now going into a room with our European allies or adversaries? Because when you get to a particular level of consciousness, it doesn't matter whether you're in a room with doves or junkro, you're going to get the same outcome. This is the power of knowing as opposed to what you believe. So now in the era of a knowledge-based economy, we have to suspend all belief because that's child's play. And as I say, this thing is a game now, but it's not child's play. So when we deal with the criminality that we adopt within the black brand, many of us go down a path of overprojection, and it's gotten so bad now that we actually have to address what it is, because young men are stealing each other's lives, and the black brand has been reduced even more to the fact that we can't even see anybody else's ops other than us. We never had that when I was a teenager. We never even had it in a direct generation afterwards. But now, African Caribbeans only see each other as ops. We don't have courage for feds. We don't have courage for people who assault our women because we'll create a reason. And one of the things that we have to know as a people is we are as strong as our weakest link. So if we allow anybody to violate our women and we won't demonstrate, what does that say about us? So now when you're walking down the road, 6'4" with muscles in your teeth, and an Anglo-Saxon Englishman will come and bump you and say, what? Are you really surprised? Due to the fact that we won't stand up for those who are the most vulnerable in our community. The fact that we've allowed our children to cancel each other's contracts and we didn't step in as men and regulate them. Are we surprised? Can we be surprised? So if we've adopted our programming to such a degree, that means we're victims. And if we're victims, how vulnerable does that make us? So are we a nation of victims? This is the question.
When we talk about programming, I start to think about computers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think programming starts with coding.
Absolutely.
So I'm like, what is the beginning of the coding of a lot of the control that they have? And then when I break down the coding, it comes down to language.
Absolutely.
And language is a big part of how you think, feel, and how far you can go in life. So I feel like a lot of the coding that's broken down, let's go to the beginning of the coding is the alphabet.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So whatever alphabet you're running on is the beginning of your coding. So your A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I hope you're with you. I know you're with me. You understand what I'm saying. And then, so where you take that coding now, whether you start using it with good English, let's say for instance, if you're in England, but then there's our own language. There's a difference in our own language.
And Ebonics. Absolutely.
And Ebonics, you know what I'm saying? So there's like, when it comes to slang, I think the slang gets worse and worse. Before it was more of a coded language. But you also always knew how to have the good vernacular.
Yeah.
Whereas now, I think it became a bit too mainstream. You know what I'm saying? Where everybody wants to learn that side before they want to learn how to speak properly. You know what I'm saying? That like So now I think in terms of the programming that I feel like a lot of people have not missed out on or misunderstood. I think it comes down to the lack of speaking well, because I think as much as people think speaking well is for quote unquote, I don't know, they might even say speaking well is for the Caucasians or speaking well
Yeah.
is for whoever it is, but that speaking well side of things makes you able to see different things in your life.
You create a photograph for every word that you have. Now, if you're limited and you don't have that vernacular and vocabulary, that's a photograph that's missing.
So what would you say about, because again, in terms of people believing that destruction is a point in terms of, because again, through the music is giving them an idea of all the destructive things that could ever happen in your life, being a pro rather
Absolutely.
than a con. So, and I'm not, and again, it's not a skin tone, it's not a skin tone situation. It's more
It's
of
culture.
it's
It's
culture.
never ever been about crayon colors. It's always about culture.
So that's where I'd be like, okay, in terms of unprogramming this all, we have to now understand it's not about, like you said, it's not about tone. It's not about who your parents are.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about how rich or poor you were. The attractiveness of
It's a culture and it's a subculture
this subculture
that becomes celebratory of crime
is, and that's why
and the criminal
so that's why I
landscape.
threw all that in there.
Yeah,
So
yeah, 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 yeah.
just talk on that a bit if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's the first thing. When we're dealing with that codification, one of the things that strips us away is a term, ethnic minority. So immediately we are othered and we made something else.
And smaller.
When you're othered and made something else, you have to find what is there for you to celebrate. And what we find, especially as men, not so much young ladies, in this generation, the last generation, but before them, it was us as men. It will be crime. We run to it. We adopt it, we celebrate it, and we don't even know why.
I think there's a side of it, yeah, where we've maybe discussed this before, is that poverty doesn't give you much to shine with.
Absolutely.
So when you're coming up in a time where you haven't got much, and you may not even be good looking, you look for the angles in which people celebrate.
Absolutely.
And so I feel like crime, because it's got that a bit, depending on what age you are, and I think in the early ages, because I feel like a lot of everything to do with what people represent as the tough guy is a young male in adolescence.
Absolutely.
So
we don't actually articulate this, but it's exactly that.
you understand what I'm saying? So if you try to even emulate that in your older stages, like the reason why it's more embarrassing than you think is because everything that you're showing is what it would have looked good for a young male in adolescence.
But a playwright would describe it as a tragedy.
Do you understand?
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't understand timing and place.
Yeah.
When they say there's a time and a place for everything.
Yeah.
And sometimes you miss that time. It doesn't mean you need to relive that time. You just need to understand everybody's got a dark side anyway. So a lot of people just need to understand that everybody's got a dark side. Everybody's got this side and everybody's got a dark side. However,
remember, sometimes we're so consumed by ourselves, we don't realize that everybody has a dark side.
that's right.
And you wouldn't realize that the guy who actually circumvented these teenage years at 20 plus VAT is actually possibly darker, more calculating, and more premeditated. And that is why he has what he has.
And that's where I think within only our culture, that people don't respect intelligence when it comes to crime.
No.
So I feel like intelligence has been
it's been maligned and undervalued.
Yeah, I think it's also been like there's also been a lot of intelligence that's been exercised within our culture
Yes,
when it comes to that side, because there's people that have had to.
Yeah.
Like crime was kind of like came out of resistance in the early stages. You know what I mean? Like it's certain things that
for the protection of the community.
So the things that they like branded as crime were resistance.
And that's only because we weren't governing a particular system.
That's
so
right.
we were, again, that's part of the black brand, in that if you resist the governance that we've created for you, that's a criminal act.
That's right.
Because resistance is a criminal act. Even now, with the newest bill that was introduced in the UK, the Police Crimes and Sentencing Bill, for you to protest is now a criminal act. We no longer live in a democracy. We live on paper by legislation in a dictatorship.
But that's why I say language is very important.
Absolutely.
And once you understand language, you understand how to do things legally. Because a demonstration is not illegal. So, like, protesting is
But it
illegal.
literally has been made. They can draw for the law. They won't because they want to make the exhibition. So when Charles' coronation took place and he was actually signed in as king and they removed people, the police kidnapped what would be perceived as state kidnapped people from the crowd. But they weren't using powers they didn't have. Those powers to kidnap people from the crowd are a new part of the Police Crimes and Sentencing Bill that was created in 2022.
Yeah.
Now, they're not going to tell people that. They're not going to articulate that. They're just going to say that they overplayed their hand. But they didn't break any law of this nation when they did that. So they have these laws, but they should have waited until they either created a false flag operation to utilize them, or there was something that actually took place organically for them to use those powers.
100%. But there's a lot of laws that have different levels of strength.
Yeah.
So again, like, and that's about being educated. So there's laws of the land and there's corporate laws.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? And once you know the laws of the land, and I'm not going to go too deep into that, but
common law
is
that lives in a totally different sphere.
And sometimes as much as you can, it's not good to just overly exploit that sometimes. But at the same time, you should know them, because even there's some small things in your life that may happen where if you know the common law will still stand above.
To circumvent the legislative law.
Yeah.
So we are obligated to be our own law administrators.
That's right.
Which means that if you actually understand, when it comes time to employ it, you can protect yourself.
That's right.
And here's the thing that people don't understand about the black brand and the adoption of the black brand. Number one, the term black doesn't actually limit to any ethnicity.
It doesn't describe nothing neither.
It's a political term.
So is white.
So is white. However, white is socially understood as the top of the totem of racial hierarchy.
Only in certain countries.
However, those countries actually do run a global economic system that is capable of shutting other countries out of that global economic
Not necessarily
system.
anymore. Not anymore.
No, a new alternative has been created, and that's within BRICS. So BRICS, as opposed to the World Bank, is a viable alternative. But that came as a default after years and years and years of Europeans siphoning people's money from their bank. Now, I don't want to lose track, because I always talk about criminals within this thing of branding as well. And what we do is we give a particular sense of hierarchy to the greatest criminals on planet Earth, not realizing that those criminals have positioned themselves to rob, exploit, and murder anybody. So the recent African coups that took place, none of these people in the World Bank has ever had a problem with a coup. It's who is committing the coup and for what purposes. For the purposes of the people. However, that's a different subject for a different show. But when we stick with the black program, the black program comes with so much negative iconography, and it's such a loaded term. Every decade, they'll create a new term to fit in the black brand. So in the 70s, we have muggers. In the 80s, we had steamers, right? In the 90s, I can't even remember what it was in the 90s.
But all that stuff comes with media.
Absolutely. Media is the greatest tool to protect the image of whiteness.
So how long have we had that for? in terms of television?
The propaganda that protects the image of whiteness far precedes TV. So now, if I'm a thief and I give myself a superior branding to protect the image of whiteness, I call myself an archaeologist, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I land as an archaeologist, you give me free reign
Mm.
to the terrain of the land.
Mm-hmm.
And then what I do is I covet what I want and then I thief it.
Mm.
And then I won't return it when your government says return it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just a thief.
Mm-hmm.
But we call them archaeologists.
Mm.
He's a learned man. He's a scholar. No, he's a thief.
Mm.
He's a premeditated thief who came in to pre what you had and clap it. Now, if I do that as an African, as we saw Killmonger, he say, I'm taking that.
Mm. But in terms of taking it, I believe that when we look deep into how they took things, they take things through documentation. So they
documentation is the first part.
So I'm going to the beginning, and that's why I'm starting there.
Absolutely,
because it's the first part.
Yeah.
They invented this thing called documentation before people.
No, they did. They actually didn't.
In terms
the
of
Moors were the first ones who had the documentation,
and that's what I'm saying.
Who took the land.
So now
through documentation, what they did is they took it, ran with it, and then they erased, like in Planet of the Apes, where you have the forbidden zone. Don't look in the forbidden zone, and then they adopted that documentation.
So, do you know, you've forwarded me on my timeline of where I was gonna go. So, I know that as well. But I was gonna start. I was gonna start over there, but you forwarded me. Yeah. But then now, sometimes you gotta be ready to exercise different levels of thought. Yeah,
absolutely.
And a lot of people are not ready for that because they're ready to believe what's been told already.
Yeah.
So now, if we look at the timeline of everything, there could be a chance here that the people that they're talking about in terms of slavery are them.
Absolutely.
And we were the people that enslaved them.
Absolutely.
This is a conversation that a lot of people don't want to have for many different reasons. But if you look at the timeline of when the Moors ran things, when the Moors ran stuff, like this is the same time they're talking about that people was being enslaved. When the Moors ran things, it's the same time that like I said, that people was being this and that was happening from Africa, where people being transported and all this different stuff.
That was at the time when the Moors ran things, would have been where we talk about the Islamic slave trade, because that was 700 years ago. So it's post the Moors where the African slave trade.
But that's what they tell you. In their documents.
Absolutely.
But if you actually look at the real our story, that's not just his story, and you look at the documentations, it shows you who was running things from who.
We were.
Yeah, and they show you who the kings were.
And we were ruthless and abusive.
Until this day, the royal family have to bow down when they see certain African leaders. They bow down to them until this day. And that doesn't get highlighted, but it still happens. And they still get on camera, but they don't highlight it.
But it's part of protecting the image of whiteness as well. So when we talk about the image...
it's part of what they understand more than what everyone else understands.
No, I'm not talking about their observance in terms of where they capitulate to those powers. Now we're talking about what is created for the world stage in terms of imagery.
And that's why I say all of that stuff has only been, I say 60 to 70 years old. So this is not like, and that's stuff whenever you've been able to convey something to a mass audience.
That's through media.
That's only been through TV. So I say
TV.
So when it was in a book, you couldn't get that everywhere. When it was in a paper, you couldn't get that everywhere. You can get that to a community of people, but where as big as media got,
mass transmission was through TV. Yeah.
So a lot of our understanding is through mass transmission and education.
Yeah, absolutely.
So again, we're at a time of information now. So because we're at a time of information, we're able to access information in a new way.
But herein lies the problem. You see, the proliferation of information confuses people who've been trained as unilateral thinkers.
Definitely.
Now, if I created an education to reduce you, how are you actually going to be effective in the age of information? Because the age of information is about knowing. It's not about belief. It's not about your subjective understanding. It's about actually knowing what are universal facts. Now, if you can't actually grasp that, it's a wrap for you. I could tell you anything.
Yeah, I believe that there's a level of a system that's needed.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to say that it's a great system or it's a good system, bad system, whatever. But there's a level of a system a system is needed in to make a world of run.
Order.
Yeah, order is needed to make anything run. Even if you start something on a small level, you realize that. You know what I mean? So I think there's a level of the order that you may need, because without the order and without the education, we wouldn't have been able to understand the things that we understand away from the education.
But however, here's the thing. If your order is governed through fear, how virtuous is your order? And imagine if your governance was delivered through love, how different that might look.
Yeah.
In terms of the balance of reciprocity.
That's very true.
So now, some people are genetically predisposed to be scared.
Mm.
Now, if you're genetically predisposed to be scared, everything you're going to do is going to be on the offensive.
That's right.
So now, if we look at the nature of empire, and you look at the most empiric nation right now, it's the United States. So if you had said they have...
Or is it China or Russia?
No, it's not. And I'm going to tell you why it's not. So if we're dealing with empire, you telling me China's the greatest threat, you telling me Iran is the most dangerous country on planet Earth, you're going to tell me that Russia is the second most dangerous. Well, if China, Russia, and Iran are so dangerous, why is it that the United States of America has 700 odd air bases around the globe where they can attack any nation at the click of a finger? And Russia has none.
Because they don't talk.
Russia has none.
That's what they told you.
China has one, and Iran has none.
But Russia don't speak, and Russia's never spoken.
Do you know what else Russia's never had? Russia never had, when Europeans carved up Africa, any colony. Isn't that amazing? And we are supposed to hate Russia and Putin. But Russia never had any colony. Portugal had colonies. Spain had colonies. England had colonies. Germany had colonies. Russia's in Europe, right? Yeah. They never had one colony. Because we are adopters of what is going on in the zeitgeist, we just become repeaters. So we're told Russia are bad guys, Chinese are bad guys. Well, we're told that. But let's deal with what actually is. What happens on the ground? I know that the United States of America has 720 odd air bases across planet Earth. Russia has none.
That's what you think.
China has, well, Russia has tactical base in one of the extreme peninsulas. I can't remember whether it's the North Pole or the South Pole. Because remember, due to the sunspots, see, global warming is a real phenomenon. It's just not due to us. So due to the sunspots, all of the ice caps that are left are melting. So when those last ones melt, where Russia might have their tactical base, that's going to be valuable land, no?
I'm sure it is. A lot of what's going on in the world, I think sometimes they give us a lot of what's going on so we can feel like we're small.
Absolutely.
And this is why, as much as I listen and I take it in, I focus on my own existence and my own world.
And your own capacity.
My own capacity, because I believe is as big as theirs. But I think, again, that's part of that the propaganda machine that they use to control us.
Absolutely.
So when you can escape their propaganda machine, I feel like there's different things that open up within yourself that can change the world, because they want you to believe that you as an individual can't change the world. But I believe that individuals can change the world. Do you know what I'm saying?
Half a dozen spiritually instructed men can change the world.
And I see that in yourself. So,
and it's reciprocal.
That's why we're talking. You know.
Absolutely.
But and when it comes to the programming, I feel like what takes away from a lot of our programming is lack of wanting to be educated.
Absolutely.
In the right way. because there's the fear that whole fear thing is something that is built within us. So it's built within animals. It's built within us in certain way. It's overcoming it. Is that it's a spiritual process that comes with faith.
That's how it's actually demonized.
Yes.
You speak white.
Yes.
That's white.
Yes.
Now, as part of the white brand, are you telling me intelligence is part of the white brand and stupidity is the mainstay of the black brand?
Yeah.
So thereby we must celebrate being stupid.
Yeah.
Because it's a mainstay of the black brand.
Amazing.
So when I say leave the black brand, you didn't create it.
No, and you're not.
It was the black brand was actually created to maintain the racial hierarchy of the totem.
And divide.
To divide, absolutely. But you know, if there's no black, what does that also mean? There's no
white.
White.
But
now,
what I think is that a lot of nations are excluded in the black and white.
110% they are.
And that's
but what it does, the reason they don't mind being excluded is between the so-called white and the so-called black at the bottom are all the other ethnicities. So they're quite happy to be in the pecking order because we're at the bottom.
That's right, but it's made 3 now. You've made 1 to 3. So because I believe that human race is brown.
Absolutely.
Different spectrums of brown, and that's just my theory. So, but if they let us know that, and if we was able to use brown, and everyone was able to use brown, then that unifies us, and that's not what they want.
No.
So they've given us all these different tones and things to connect to, but then some of them are derogatory, and some of them are people take and they enjoy it.
But you've also got to look at, if I were a particular hue, and I wanted to protect again the image of whiteness, you could take somewhere like. You take anywhere on the continent. So let's take South Africa. So you bring in Asians as a management. Let's call them, what do I call them when they're in corporates? Caretaker managers.
But in skin tone, why are they not black?
So you bring niggas with straight hair, no problem. So you bring in your caretaker managers and your caretaker managers actually do your job more vigorously than you would do the job. Well, now you just sit back. That was like the first form of AI. Uganda, South Africa. You bring in the coloureds, and then they govern for you. And then now this thing runs like clockwork because we get all the income. We're still at the top of the racial hierarchy in terms of the totem of race. Blacks, so-called, are at the bottom, who come with all that negative iconography. They got thicker skulls, smaller brains, lower IQs. They're not as remarkable until when we get into any actual sphere that we're in, we actually excel to become the best. So if you look at the United States, just because it's so polarized, you would say Johnny Cochran, you would say Oprah Winfrey, you would say, because it wasn't just sports stars. So whatever we touched, we actually excel when we reach a level playing field and we have the same intellectual capital as you. So the minute we're imbued with the information, we excel. So then, where did the Tyler Perry come from?
Exactly.
Who had the intellectual capital to actually acquire a studio to become the biggest studio in the United States?
And why isn't that celebrated enough? Because
and therein lies the conundrum, because it is and it isn't. It is celebrated, but it's not celebrated to the degree. Now, if Tyler Perry had a custodial sentence as a failed criminal,
thank you,
and built a studio,
and he was a big time drug dealer, and he was Harry O.
It would Harry O. Realize,
and respect to Harry O is free, and hopefully he changes it because he's done amazing things anyway.
To be able to invest in death row and create a legacy like that.
Come on, big up Harry O. I'm just saying. The reason why we even know Harry O's name is because there was a drug legacy next to it.
Exactly.
And
but imagine that innovator who hadn't bought into the black brand, who had just been the raw entrepreneur, who could have invested as a seed. When we deal with seed capital, because we don't talk about these things, do you know that Anglo-Saxon men are 98% of the recipients of venture capital And everybody else, that includes women, Asians, so-called blacks, Latinas, receive 2% of venture capital.
But when we advance,
But bear with me. The point I was making is,
Mhm.
Harry O was a venture capitalist in one of the most successful hip hop labels of the 90s when it was the era to be in it.
Yeah.
Death Row.
Yeah.
They made so much money that they could spend 13 million on legal fees with the guy who connected Harry O to Suge, which was his lawyer. He made 13 million from Death Row in just criminal defense. 13 million US dollars. What they turned over. But they didn't have all of the picture, did they? Because we're so emotionally attached to the black brand.
That's right.
And crime being such a strong part of that brand.
100%.
But the failure of those who get custodial sentences, because we can say Suge is a failed CEO.
But when we look at China and we look at what they've done in 30 years,
Woo!
it's celebrated and we celebrate it. Yeah.
We're forced to. Because you know what China has actually done? A population of 1.2 billion who took 350 million people out of abject poverty into working poverty, 300 million people out of working poverty into middle class, and has more millionaires per square capita than any nation on earth in 30 years.
Yeah. And I look at that and I'm like,
that's to be celebrated.
that's to be celebrated also. I celebrate us as a human race, innit?
Absolutely.
Rather than celebrating the, you know what I mean?
Difference of
small wins and having the same narrative that we've had 30 years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
How dare we have the same narrative from 30 years ago when a lot has changed?
But the brand hasn't changed. Because Nike is Nike.
But it's changed. Things have changed. This is the thing. And like I said,
it doesn't stay the same. It will always regress.
It's about celebration. And it's like, again, Tyler Perry's got the studio, bro. Like, he's one man. I never knew one man to own Hollywood. Hollywood is owned by a lot of people.
A lot of people.
Yeah. Well, and then the Tyler Perry studio is owned by Tyler Perry and it's like 5 times the size of Hollywood. And people are using that studio. It's not even like man are not
for mainstream production.
It's mainstream production. Plus, he's now bought BET, and I think
they actually interrupted that.
Did they?
Yeah. So during they were following the due diligence, but then why? So now you touched on a very important issue. Why do Europeans wait until we develop our platforms to such a degree that they're highly influential? And then come in with $1 billion to purchase it?
Because, you know, I initially thought that they was part to do with it in the first place. But
who were to do with?
You know, like the BT and things like that. You know what I mean?
No, here's the thing.
Like, what you got to understand is this as well. You see, the most influential people, yeah? When it comes to numbers, there's a different conversation.
Yeah.
When you sit with people that are movers and shakers, and the reason that they try to hold back vernacular and articulation from some of our people because they know that that's the actual.
That's the power.
That's the power.
That's the metaphysics. Because then you can see
and go into every room, and people are not looking at you like you think they're looking at you. Whereas if you notice that the less intelligence you have, you think people are watching you, you think people are looking at you, you think everyone's onto your case, you think all these negative things. And
you know what I want to do? Just not to cut you, but I want to give it an avatar.
Yeah.
And the avatar I want to give it is Swizz Beatz. Where Swizz Beatz went back to university to do an MBA, but a specialist MBA for people who had corporations that were doing like 500 million. And within that specialist MBA, that allowed him to become the guy that could purchase Tony Stark's yard in real life.
You see?
So now when we have the keys to the information,
100%.
in what we remove what we don't know.
Oh yeah, listen.
With the real information
100%.
that would allow you to become the creative director of Bacardi, of this car company, of this and this and this and this, and open doors and start Verses
100%.
and sell that for X amount.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. But still ownership.
Still shareholder, absolutely.
You got to remember, like, even like the
That's to be celebrated.
there's power that of understanding, overstanding. That's why
Overstanding.
I'll even call my whole thing.
Yeah,
So,
overstanding. Let's deal with that.
like, like my friend that owns a dog shop in Belsize Park here.
Yeah, yeah.
A dog grooming shop, sorry. Not selling, no, they groom.
It's the right business in Belsize Park.
Yeah. Him and his missus and that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Jay-Z and Chris Martin just bowled you and brought the dog to you. Yeah? Bowled you, they walked down low key, like very play down,
Yeah.
close.
No need to overproject.
Big Jay-Z and Chris Martin, no security, nothing. Yeah?
Don't need to.
Kevin brought the dog. You know what I mean? Mama's like, yo, you know what I mean? And they're like, yeah, you know what I mean? Had their little banter. They went about their business, came back for the dog later. No one would ever believe that happened because...
Based on our perception of us and the value we give to each other.
And also based on people that want the light.
Yeah.
So that once you get past a certain thing, you wouldn't even understand that certain people are friends and how they know how to be.
Yeah.
Like even dress codes. Knowing that if I just put on this hat, because I always said that, like even as a celebrity or whatever you are, if you don't actually want the light, you don't have to have it. You don't have to have it. You know what clothes.
You choose to have the light.
Thank you. I believe.
Because you want to be Beyonce all the time in the gold lame boots front stage. You can't play me show in the backup.
When you don't want it, it just takes a hat and a hoodie and some plain clothes.
Yeah.
And no one's going to look at you.
You can be a civilian.
You can be a civilian.
Absolutely.
And then, like, especially in London. And that's what people don't understand. Like, depending on what area you're in. No one's
T-shirt and jeans.
No one's looking at you.
No one's looking at you. No one's interested. Everybody's far too self-absorbed.
Unless you take yourself to a certain area. And then in local area, people are like, that guy looks like... That's what they'll say. Before they actually think it's you, they'll be like, he looks like
him.
So it's the power of not wanting.
No, do you know what it is? It's the power of not needing it.
That's, you know what I'm saying?
Because you see, another part of the black brand is the huge overprojection. The external validation too much. But remember, part of our training, our programming, has been to seek external validation. And the way that works is that all solutions are external to you, because we don't solve our own shit, right? All solutions are external. Now, this is, you'll see it in movies, you'll see it in all popular culture. Same way they said with Frank Lucas. One Negro couldn't have done that. No, but we can. Because we're the most innovative people on earth because we work with nothing. However, that isn't what is conveyed through our programming. So, due to our programming is embedded in us from 3 years old, the minute we're in nursery.
The 7.
And because we believe that it is an education as opposed to an indoctrination, we adopt that stage. And imagine if you thought you were uploading Windows 11 and you were actually uploading a virus, how would that affect your CPU and your computer system? Is there anything virtuous that can happen after that operating system, the virus, has been uploaded?
But it depends on what you're getting from it. Because if you're, you know what I mean, if you're watching porn and you know your computer's getting viruses, are you going to stop watching it?
Let's deal with a time before you were sophisticated enough to even understand what your operating system entails.
But I'm giving you that in terms of like,
and I might enjoy that. Now look, imagine
knowing what it's doing.
I discovered porn at 8 years old.
How?
Penthouse. My gran was a cleaner, and she was cleaning for this advertising company.
Okay.
She got me out the way. Sit there, park yourself in the reception. Now I'm sitting in the reception, looking through all the magazines. Oh, god damn. I seen the nanny for the first. I know my name. Everything that said Penthouse on it, on that table, I picked up. So there were 8 copies of Penthouse. This is how young I was. I had a bag of Monster Munch. I've taken the Monster Munch out of the big bag, the multi-pack, and I've put the penthouse in there. And my grand said, you good? Mm-hmm. I got the 8 penthouse in the in the bag. No, my heart was cool. Do you know why? Because I've always been me.
Yeah, no, but you know what, like
I know what was in the bag.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
So
when you said,
so imagine now, were it a virus, it would have been a willing virus that I was ready to adopt and undertake based on the packaging of what I was impressed by. So this is what is done with us. And this is part of the black brand. And I call it nigger programming. Because we celebrate criminals. Don't forget, Europeans celebrate criminals, you know. How do I know about Meyer Lansky? Why is The Godfather such a great trilogy?
Being interested in something is not always celebrating it.
No, it's celebrated.
No, I'm saying I know we know it's celebrated. I'm saying there's a side of things that's interest.
Yes.
You know, like when people like to look at go to the zoo.
But you got to remember, we're positioned at the bottom of the racial totem pole.
But I don't think gangster always comes from one culture.
Gangster doesn't come from one culture. All cultures have gangsters.
Yeah.
All cultures have gangsters who legitimize their income at some point. Why are we the only ethnicity whose gangsterism doesn't empower our community?
Because I think that we're one of the only ethnicities that actually try to bring it to life. And that's what I'm saying. That's what I mean. That's what I mean by not saying like that. We bring to life in not just. It was one of the first, should I say, brought to life what we saw in the movies. Because I think that Godfather made those kind of people bring that to life. Mm-hmm. I think that those cultures of people weren't like that before the Godfathers, but anyone that looked like that,
they were.
Yeah, but they didn't.
So here's the thing. Here is the lineage. Here is the timeline in the United States.
They didn't trust it.
Here's the timeline in the United States. So the first generation of gangsterism were the Yiddishes, the Jewish, and they established their communities completely. Because what they did was they took the money from the gangsterism and they legitimized it within their communities. Yeah. That means it went through the laundromat in the Jewish community. Then the Italians came after them and they took their money.
That's what they told you. Because you got to remember that we've had establishments that they'd never ever taught us about. Even Black Wall Street is not really spoken about properly. Mm-hmm. So they try to bring down everything that we've done and make it look like these are the people that done it properly and these are the people that done it first.
Absolutely.
No, every resistance was from us initially.
Absolutely.
We are the first resistors. So that means that we are the first quote unquote gang or mobsters.
And I correct myself on that point. In the same way that Garvey was one of the most influential men down to the Vietnamese resistance of the United States invading. Mm-hmm. His name evades me.
A lot of things are a lot of things they take away from us to make us look weak.
Which is again part of the protection of the image of whiteness and
the strength of them.
So defaming the black brand.
Yeah, because even when they explain that everything, all the strength came from England, this small little island
punching way above its weight,
that went and just took all of these people. That's not even technically possible,
feasible in any way, shape, or form. So no, it's not.
Half of the things that we're holding on to, again, if you just check them, and that's why I don't run the slave thing as they have told us. You know me. I don't want to go too far.
It didn't happen in the way that we've been taught.
And we don't want to talk about that. It started in Europe, and the whole word of slavery came from the Slavs.
From the Slavs, and us enslaving them.
It's even spot the same. Slavs is
exactly the same.
And again, the history of that, and the history of what Europeans done, and the history of who was running Europe at the time, again,
which was the Moors.
So now, again, when it comes to reparations, yeah.
Well, then it messes with that argument, doesn't it?
We're asking for things that maybe, possibly, if we do the real research, we realize there was a picture that I saw the other day. I don't know where it was from, but it was, I don't know if it was the slave ships or whatever, but it was like a drawing of the slave ships and there was a real picture of the slave ships. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And the people that was on the color of the people on the real one were
Europeans.
yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe it was a good place for us to end. But
also, what we've got to understand is that there is a point in which the racial balance shifted. So when you look at, and this is why I always talk about 1666 with Cromwell.
But it's not racial, it's particular countries. And until we get down to the
down to nations.
Nations.
So now when Britain kicked back and Cromwell kicked out the Moors, and that was the burning of the libraries because no bakery caught on fire and caught another yard. That's ridiculous. That's a child's story.
Of course.
So, however, to the degree that we've been so far removed from it, it sounds so fantastical that we can't envisage that the black brand is a total construct to defend from that ever happening again. So now when we deal with societies who control society, we understand the nature of the attack on so-called black is to protect from the Moors ever happening to Europeans again.
Also,
and this is why we are underdeveloped to such a degree.
No, but also understanding that there's an advantage on having a certain level of melanin without calling it this and
just in nature. So because the sun is attacking. So
that's got nothing to do with
in sunspots now. No, it has nothing to do with black.
So that's more of the advantage that they're trying to attack. So you don't understand your power, because as the shift is happening, your powers get enhancing. You get what I'm saying? So
completely. So the planet is going through a spiritual shift.
That's right. Just
due to the sunspots. And this is why you'll see a Bill Gates wants to create these clouds that protect from the sun. That is for Europeans' defense. Exactly. It is nothing for us. So we need to know that this is the most advantageous stage that we will ever be at in humanity.
Exactly.
As the world is shifting in line with our melanin. Our melanin is a feminine to receive the downloads from this spiritual shift. But if we overlook that due to all the distraction, we're going to miss out. Subscribe to the SigmaCarta YouTube channel. Our aim is to be on the same bandwidth by understanding, agreeing, adopting and applying. SigmaCarta is the unconventional wisdom of men. Subscribe today.